Welcome back, sisters. You're watching Women's AM with myself, Hassana, and joining us on the panel today we have Sister Zainab and Sister Ayan. Well, it's time for our next segment now, where we'll be discussing how do you tell a child about terminal illness. Let's get some advice from the sisters. Well, a really, really difficult subject, and one I think a lot of people find difficult to talk about. Sister Zainab, what kind of advice would you give to sisters out there who are facing this kind of dilemma?
There is so much good advice on online. The bereavement websites are brilliant in terms of their broken down advice, and these are some of the things that I found. Being told by someone who's taken care of the child, I think, is important. It allows them to have that connection with that person, to feel, able to confide, to be open. If it's a stranger, then there's already an awkwardness there between that person and the child. Not delaying in telling them when the knowledge is definite. I think this is another thing. We try to shield children and try to keep this information away from them, but they pick up more than we do most of the time. They're so sensitive actually to the different emotional vibes that are around them. So they know something's wrong, and telling them that something isn't wrong is only perpetuating the fear that they've already got.
It's a really difficult subject, and one that perhaps we might not even think that we need to talk about, because in our heads we might be thinking, well, am I really going to be affected by this? But the reality is that terminal illnesses can come in the form of lots of different things, and the child might be affected. It could be a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or anyone within the family unit who might be going through this, and there does need to be that discussion in place in order for the child to understand what's actually happening. Sister Ayan, what's your thoughts on this?
Definitely, you need to have a discussion with the child or the children, because no one likes to be in the dark about anything. And the thing is that children aren't,
they're no different.
They're no different. They, the more that you include them in these discussions, the easier it will be for them to cope with the changes that are going to be happening.
But some people might say that we're not building up their resilience by talking to them about it. We're actually making them aware of something which perhaps they don't really need to. Should they have that burden of responsibility of knowing about something which is so kind of burdensome upon them?
I think I totally disagree with that, because they do need to know, because it will affect them. And it's worse for someone to not know that someone was ill and then all of a sudden to be told that this person is no longer going to be around. Whereas if you were to tell them that, look, they're not feeling well, this is what could happen. But the thing is to find ways to tell them which is appropriate to their age and to the capacity of their understanding as well. Because as long as you include them in this, then they'll be able to open up to you, like you were saying, confide in you. They'll be able to talk to you, and the thing is that they'll be going through a lot of emotions as well, because even if you don't tell them that something's wrong, they will sense it. And the fact that they can be open with you about it will be better for them to emotionally as well, so they can talk to you about it. And plus you can include them in what's happening. Children always want to be helpful, they always want to be useful, and they always want to be part of family life, obviously, and taking care of someone who's ill will be part of that. So even just telling them, could you fetch Granny a glass of water, or could you help with this, or could you, it includes them in everything rather than being shut out from things.
And it builds up that connection with the person, and they kind of have that time to almost take in what's going on, and it gives them the ability to talk about their feelings on every kind of step of the way. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And I also think it's quite interesting that if you speak to them about it earlier, they actually have a really greater understanding of lots of other things, the importance of looking after people that are sick, how our deen and our religion emphasizes this, and the kind of lessons we could take away. For example, how to speak to other people about how they're feeling. So there's lots of different kind of strands which could come off speaking to them about it a little bit earlier. Sister Zainab, you were talking before about some really interesting information that's available online. What are some of the things that you found from these kind of online websites?
There are some nice bits of information about visiting. So like you guys were saying, giving them that time to kind of get used to what's going on. Like you're saying, it's not even just building a relationship with that person, the relationship is already there. So imagine we were told at the last minute that something was happening, and being robbed of that opportunity to see them, to have things to be able to talk to them about, to kind of be involved in whatever's going. It's severing that relationship before, unjustly, I think, is quite unfair. So allowing them to be in that environment, like you said about tests, this is the thing, getting used to this idea that life is a test and how to deal with these different things. And they learn a lot from how we deal with it, and then also just having that experience. And the more, softly we can pull them through whatever's going on, the better that is. And kind of just throwing them in it at the last minute sometimes can be really disturbing and really distressing.
The parent is really key here, isn't it? Because if the parent is reacting in a way which is kind of, resilient and strong and kind of leading by example, then, hopefully that will have an impact on the child. But if the parent is kind of, unable to take themselves away from the situation and almost deal with what's at hand here, then it can be very difficult for the child to process what is happening. But I also find that sometimes, parents might feel slightly kind of distant if the child doesn't want to talk to them about it, but they'd like to perhaps talk to a cousin about it or an aunt rather than the parent themselves. Is this something that you think is a problem, Sister Ayaan?
I don't think it's a problem. We all have people that we're more comfortable discussing certain things with, and I don't think it's reflective of the relationship between the parent and the child if the child decides that they don't want to discuss it with their parents. Just be happy with the thought that they are discussing it with someone and they're not bottling it in. So even if that means that they're discussing it with another family member or they're discussing it with a friend, at least they're discussing it, because the worst thing that could happen is just bottling everything in, and that can manifest in other ways physically. They might become very angry, they might, do things that they normally wouldn't do because they've kept it all in. So the point is, as long as they're talking to someone, it's okay. It's not a problem in your relationship with one another.
And we're talking about, speaking to children about someone who has a terminal illness, but of course there does need to be a discussion about what happens after the person has passed. And I think that's something that sometimes we forget about. We take them on this journey up until the point where they feel they understand what's going on, and then suddenly when that person's no longer there, we're going through our own grieving process, and we might forget that the child also has to process lots of thoughts and feelings at that time, Sister Zainab. Isn't that right?
No, absolutely. I think the burden of a parent is huge, and this is where the extended family comes in. As like you were saying, sometimes we're not handling things as well as we would like to. So to have the help of that other calm person who can actually give really good advice and give comfort, and to be able to talk to the child, like normally the kids will go to someone who's kind of the most calm and the most kind of secure, and the person who will answer all of their questions no matter how many times they ask it. Sometimes they'll ask the same question again and again because they're still trying to process. And if we're on edge or if we're finding it difficult to handle, then having people like that around is a blessing, alhamdulillah. So, just answer the questions as simply as possible. But I think sometimes we assume they don't understand very much when they understand a lot, and they can actually deal with a lot at a very young age, and the older we get, the more harder we find to deal with loss.
On that note, we are going to end that discussion, but Jazakallah khair, this is some really great tips and advice there. Well, an interesting segment there, but unfortunately we have come to the end of today's programme. We are back, of course, tomorrow with our final episode in the Women's Health series, where we'll be discussing endometriosis, so do join us for that interesting topic. Before we go, here's another quick reminder of this week's competition.
This week on Women's AM, we are holding an exciting competition for you sisters out there. Up for grabs is a year's subscription for a sisters magazine. To be in with a chance to win this fabulous goodie, all you have to do is answer the following question. Which is the shortest surah in the Quran? A. Surah Al-Kawthar. B. Surah Tawbah. C. Surah Al-Fatiha. D. Surah Al-Nas. To enter, email your answer A, B, C or D to womensam@islamchannel.tv, along with your name and address and what you most like about Women's AM. The deadline for the entry is Friday the 18th of April 2014 at 4 p.m. All applicants need to be over 18 and residing in the UK. Please note, only one entry per person per household. A winner will be randomly selected from all correct entries, so get entering.
Great competition there, so do get those entries in. Before we go, here's some beautiful advice from Sister Yasmin Mujahid on hardship. He created both night and day. If it's dark in your life right now, be patient. The sun always rises. And if it's light right now, be thankful, but don't get too attached to the sun. It's in its design to also set. So praise him for both the night and the day, and know that he never sets. So Jazakallah khair to all the sisters on the panel. Until tomorrow, remember us and the ummah in your du'as. We'll see you then. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.